share my screen. Just a moment. Okay. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. And I want to thank Shelley, our hostess, and welcome those who are present here, my parents and my sister who are with us in Shelley's house right now. Maybe sit over there, Shelley. Sorry. Okay, great. Thank you. And dedicate the shir in Zchut for Refuah Shlema for Moshe Ben Malka. Okay. I thought it would be a nice idea to explore a mitzvah that as I'm assuming that most of us are Olim Chadashim, relatively new, some very new. My parents, I'm going to welcome them on their Aliyah. And some of us have been here for a longer period of time. And there are certain halachot that are really unique to living in Eretz Yisrael. There are those that say that all of halacha is kept in Eretz Yisrael on a doraita level, and no halacha needs to be kept in Chutz La'aretz. That's one opinion, except on a rabbinic level as practice. And there's one set of halachot that we don't even get to practice in Chutz La'aretz, that are just not relevant in Chutz La'aretz. And those are all of the mitzvot hatzluyot ba'aretz, all of the mitzvot that are really only necessary to be kept in Israel. And I think that some of these mitzvot are ones that aren't generally studied as a part of our curriculum growing up in Chutz La'aretz, but yet are really significant parts of our halacha, parts of our tradition, and are important really to learn about and is chut to keep. So it's one of the very special things. I know that when we made Aliyah, that we were so excited to be able to have a garden of some sort. We don't have a very developed garden, but we have a couple of trees. We have a very successful lemon tree, apple tree, which is somewhat successful. We have a plum tree that has given us absolutely no plums because we didn't realize that you need to have two in order to produce any fruit. In any event, the most common situation that we have for observing these halachot, which we're going to learn about today, is a lemon tree. We have a very successful lemon tree. And from time to time, and the season is pretty long, we'll pick a whole bunch of lemons, and then we go through this ritual to make them kosher, because produce that's grown by Jews in Eretz Yisrael have the status that's called tevel. Tevel means produce that Terumot and Maasrot, that the special gifts to the Kohanim and the Leviim and the Aniyim, and we'll learn about the various stages and levels of them. Until Terumot and Maasrot are taken, then you're not supposed to eat from those fruits and vegetables except under certain conditions. Let's talk for a couple of minutes about situations where it's not necessary to keep these halachot, and then we'll move into when are situations where it's necessary to keep these halachot and when are situations where it's preferable. So we're going to try to break it down like that. So let me talk, and then we'll, step by step, I'm getting ahead of myself, and this is something that I haven't ever had the opportunity to teach before, so I'm excited to be able to teach it, but I want to try to take it step by step. There's two parts to this, to what I want to accomplish today. The second part is the practical part, which I'm honestly going to tell you I'm feeling a bit intimidated by, because I want to convey enough information that people can know on a basic level what to do, but I'm certainly not going to be able to convey enough information to cover all scenarios. And other than I'll just say that I'm going to refer you to your sitter, to different websites, and to get more, to enhance your knowledge and your information, and also make myself available for questions at the ends of class. If you remind me, I will put in my chat, or you can get in touch with Elise or Shelley with my contact information. If you have any practical questions, I'm sure I'm not going to be able to cover everything. then you can get in touch with me, and I will help from what I know, and I will help you get an answer if I don't know. I want to start by just reading a few sources from the Sefer HaChinuch about what these mitzvot are and about what the meaning of the mitzvah is. And that's something that in the shiurim I always try to do, to take a halacha, take a mitzvah, and learn some practical halacha, but also try to leave with some inspiration, with some understanding of if we believe that drachat derech and the ways of Hashem are pleasant, and that keeping halacha is meant to enhance our lives and enhance our connection to God, to one another, to the land. So this is a really great example of a halacha that is meant to connect us in all these different ways. And there are, a lot of various details and various aspects of it, but I want to kind of try to present the hashkafa of it, and hopefully that will inspire us to really want to keep the halacha, and then we'll work on the knowledge and the empowerment of that we can do this and how to do this. Okay, so the mitzvot that I'm referring to specifically are the mitzvot of hafrashat, Terumot, and Maasrot. There is a requirement to take off some gifts to the Kohanim and the Leviim, and we're going to see other situations before you partake of your produce. So what are those different gifts? We're going to learn specifically about Truma. We're going to learn about Maaser. I'm going to learn about a little bit about Maaser Sheni, Maaser Ani. Those are the ones that we're going to talk about. And then we're going to see how do we practically do that today. So the first one we're going to talk is called Truma Gedola. And I'm going to read from the Sefer HaChinuch and translate. Mitzvah hafrashat Truma Gedola, shenitztavenu la'afrish ben hadagan v'atirosh v'hayitzar Truma, v'natan nitenot ala kohen, v'yanekre Truma Gedola. So it's a commandment that we have to take off from grains and from wine and from oil, a portion, and give that to the kohen. Ve'al ze ne'emar reshit tegancha v'tiroshcha v'yitzarecha titein lo ve'amru zechronam levracha ki midin Torah ema shiur ela afilu chita achat poteret kri gadol aval chachamim amru lafrish yoter. So the amounts that the Torah set up are that really you only need to take one grain. Let's say you harvest your fields of wheat, taking one grain and giving for the kohen, that would be sufficient to now allow you to eat the rest, the entire field of grain, the entire harvest. But the rabbis gave amounts that it should be more than that. And the generous amount, the average amount was 1/50th of the grain. The generous amount was 1/40th. The stingy amount was 1/60th. We're going to see that those amounts are not going to be relevant to us today, but that's something that you should know. It's called ayin binonit is 1/50th, ayin tova, and ayin ra'ah 1/40th, 1/60th. Okay. What's the reasoning behind this? Now, I just want to say that all of the halacha that we're going to talk about now, there are rules every step of the way. But one of the rules that is important to know is the stage at which you're obligated in Terumot and Maasrot. It's the stage at which you bring it into your home. You complete the harvest process. So one of the examples that I wanted to mention before, where you're not obligated in Terumot and Maasrot, is if you're in the field and you pick one by one, you pick an apple from an orchard, as you're just taking a walk in your orchard and you feel like having an apple and you're eating it in the garden, then you're not obligated in Terumot and Maasrot. You haven't yet brought it home. So that is considered to be what's called achilat aray. It's like on the way kind of eating and not officially like harvesting. And then you're not obligated to the point. And also, you're not able to take Terumot and Maasrot on produce that is still growing, that's still attached to the ground. So you can't like pick some and say, okay, I'll do my Terumot and Maasrot now for all of the harvest. It's only once it's been harvested that Terumot and Maasrot are relevant for it. Okay, so that's just one point that I wanted to make. Now, what the Chinuch explains, Mishorshei HaMitzvah, what is the reasoning? What are the roots of this mitzvah? Lefisha dagan v'atirosh v'yitzar hin ikar michyatan shel briot, So the grains and oil and wine are the main foods. The entire world belongs to God. So therefore it would be warranted for a person to remember his creator when he has all the blessings that God has given him. And to take a little bit off for the sake of God, in the name of God. So what do you do with it? You're not going to give it to God. What does that mean? And you give it to those who serve God, which are the Kohanim, because they're the ones that are constantly engaged in serving God. So before you get any benefit from it, you want to first set aside a part for those who serve God the closest. And that's the way in which you're accrediting and recognizing God in all of the things that God has given you. My son is in the process of learning Mishnah towards his bar mitzvah, and so I was just talking to him last night. I'm like, from what you've learned, he's up to these. I think he's learning the Mishnayot that have to do with these halachot. And I said, well, from what you've learned, what should I tell my students tomorrow? Why do we give Truma and Maasrot? And he said, to show that everything comes from God. And that's really what the Sefer HaChinuch is saying. So one of the ways in which there's many, and this is something we could talk about in all the rules of kashrut and all the rules of brachot. Many halachot at their root have that idea of recognizing that all the bracha that we have and all the things that we have really are given to us by the Creator, and we recognize that in many ways. One of which is by recognizing that He only gives us permission to eat them under certain conditions, and there are certain things that we have to do and certain rules that we have to observe. And it's a funny thing to think about, but there are rules of kashrut relating to fruits and vegetables. It's something that in Chutz La'aretz we just don't connect with. Like, right, if you're going to a non-kosher store, the safest thing to eat, is fruits and vegetables. Like, what can be safer? You don't have to worry about it. But in Israel, that's not the case. In Israel, there is kashrut connected to fruits and vegetables. They're real, they're serious. And I'll just share something interesting that I heard from Rav Rimon a number of years ago when he was talking about a trip that he made, I think it was a fundraising trip for Gush Katif, for Job Katif. And he, for those of, I don't know how familiar you are with Rav Rimon, but one of his areas of expertise is Shemitah, and that is going to be relevant, in a year's time. But he said he wanted a snack, and he went into a supermarket in New York or whatever it was, and he picked up an apple, and he went through in his mind, what halachot does he need to know before he purchases this apple? And he has this like checklist. Okay, Shemitah he doesn't have to worry about, and Truma and Maasrot he doesn't have to worry about it, and this he doesn't. And he said after he went through that whole list and he realized that none of them were relevant in this apple, he had no desire for the apple anymore. And it was such an interesting way of looking at these halachot, that when you keep these halachot, what happens is that every act of eating, it's not just eating, it's not just satisfying your hunger or tasting something yummy, but it's a way to connect with God, because you're doing it in the way that God in His infinite wisdom set for us in the Torah. So what I want to break down, so with Truma, it's the most obvious. You're setting something aside to indicate that everything that you have comes from Hashem. But I think some of the other details get a little bit more detailed and a little bit more subtle. Let's talk about Maaser. Okay, so Maaser, I think a lot of us are familiar with the concept of a tithe or a Maaser, like Maaser Ksafim, of giving tzedakah in the amounts of a tenth. And really the model for that is the model of Maaser that's given to the Levium. So there's something that's called Maaser Rishon. There's really different kinds of Maasrot. There's Maaser Rishon, which we're about to learn about. There's Maaser Sheni, which we will learn about. And there's Maaser Ani. And then there's also Trumat Maaser. So we have a bunch of things that we have to, a bunch of details that we're gonna have to talk about. So what's Maaser Rishon? So the Sefer HaChinuch in Shin Sani Hey, Shenitchayvu b'nei Yisrael l'teit chilek echad me'asara chalakim mizera haaretz laleviim. We have to give 1/10 of our produce to the Levium. Shne'emar kiet maaser b'nei Yisrael asher arimu Hashem Truma natati laleviim. So meaning, the pasuk says that we give this tenth to God, who gives it to the Levium. Okay? V'namar b'seder b'chukotai v'chol maaser haaretz lahashemhu. V'zehu hanikra maaser Rishon. So the maaser really is something we give to God, and God allots it to the Levium. Why? Mishor sheha mitzvah. Lefi shesheva halevi bachar Hashem b'toch achiv la'avodato tamid b'mikdasho. Hashem chose the Shevet of Levi to serve him in his mikdash. Al kain hayami chasto alehem latet lahem yichyatam derech kavod. And because that is their job, God, as a chesed to them, wanted them to be able to subsist and have their livelihood in a respectable way, and that they shouldn't have to labor. If they're doing, their labor will be the avodat hakodesh in the mikdash, and Hashem is freeing them from the technical work of the field to be able to produce, to be able to earn their livelihood. Because it's befitting for a servant of the king, right, for the king's ministers to have their livelihood provided by others. That it should be prepared for them. To free them up for the service of God. And really, technically, they're one shevet, so they should get 1/12. But so we're going to give them a higher portion than other people get out of kavod for them, because of their honored position. They should get a little bit of a larger portion. And they're going to get their, like their 1/10, where they don't have to worry about they don't have any expenses, they just get it ready to use. And a person who provides for those who serve God with their own money, right? And this is something I think that if we abstract away from the technical, giving the Levium the actual tenth of their produce, giving them their food, which I'm going to say nowadays we don't do, but what do we do nowadays? People who support yeshivas or Talmidei Chachamim or institutions, that this is what they're doing, right? And what is they're supporting those that serve God more directly, so that they're taking part in freeing them up for the ability to do that. And look at the bracha that's promised them. It's a fascinating thing. He will be blessed. All of his parnasa will be blessed because he's using his money to provide for those who are serving God. Maasrot siag laosher. This is a quote from Pirkei Avot, that a person who gives Maasrot, this is a way of achieving wealth. And I don't think we find those comments those kinds of promises so readily in the Torah about mitzvah, do this mitzvah and you're assured, success. But about this, there are psukim that indicate, and Mamarei Chazal that indicate, that this is a recipe for success. Gam amru zechronam levracha, she'asur la'adam lachshov b'levavo v'lomar enaseh im yetiv Hashem li v'hitaski b'mitzvotav. The Gemara says in Masechet Tanit, it's usur for a person is forbidden to think to himself, let me test God. Let me see if it's worth it to me to keep mitzvot. Okay, because let's see, if God is going to reward me for keeping mitzvot, a person's not allowed to do that, because we don't know how reward and punishment works. And just because you don't get immediate reward for doing a mitzvah doesn't mean that Hashem's hashgacha isn't working and that Hashem is not rewarding and punishing. And we don't have the right to kind of demand that kind of immediate reward from God. And we're told in an explicit pasuk in Devarim, do not test God. Zulati b'mitzvah, except for this mitzvah of Maasrot. that here you're allowed to test God by doing it and being zaris and being zealous in doing it and seeing if you're going to be successful because of it. And it's explicit in the Nevi'im. Sefer Malachi says, Haviu et kol ha'ma'aser el beit ha'otzar, bring all of your tithes to the storehouses, to the treasury, uvichanuni na bezod, amar Hashem, and test me with this, Hashem said. So Hashem says, test me and see if you don't benefit from giving that tithe. You know, and I don't know, I've heard from many people who give tzedakah, who are very, you know, because tzedakah could be, we're going to see that, especially in Maser Ani, that is tzedakah, but being generous with this in this way, does a person lose financially? And the promise here is you will not lose financially from this. This is something when you take upon yourself, and I think if we go back to the reasoning that's given for Truma, and it's being given here for Maser, certainly for Maser Ani, and I think we can abstract away to all kinds of matanot, of yonim, certainly, where there's a sense of you're saying, it doesn't belong to me. Everything that I have, Hashem has given me in order to do something with it. And if I'm not going to lose by doing mitzvot with my property. And in that way, we have the right to test God, in a sense, with Maasrot. Okay? All right. Now, we have Truma, and we have Maaser Rishon. Okay? So Truma is min haTorah just a little bit, maybe 1/50th midirabanan. That goes to the Kohen. Now, the rules of Truma are that the Kohen has to eat it when he's tahor. So a Kohen has to be in a state of tahara in order to eat it. He's not allowed to eat the Truma or to handle the Truma if he's not tahor. We're not tahor today. The Kohanim try to be tahor, but we can't. We don't have paraduma. We don't have the ability to fully purify ourselves. And therefore, Kohanim cannot eat Truma today. So even though we're required to set aside Truma, it doesn't get eaten today. And we'll talk about the ramifications of that practically. Hopefully we'll have some time soon. Now, the next level of Maaser is called Truma Maaser. So the Leviim, from the tenth that they get, they have to give 1/10 to the Kohanim. So the Leviim, while they are the servants of God and they are the honorable people who are supported, they also have to recognize that there's someone greater than them. And I don't want to take time to read all of this, but the Sefer Chinuch gets into how God chose the Leviim, but of the Leviim, there are the select family that serve God in the closest way, and those are the Kohanim, and the Leviim have to recognize the rights of the Kohanim and provide for them as well. And I just underlined this line that which says Nitztavula Tate Mikol Asher Yitlu Mibnei Israel Chelek Ha'asuri LeMishartim Hagdolem. So this greater tribe has to give from what they get. They have to give to the great people that are greater than them. Ubechein Yitnu Aliban, and they have to pay attention. Ki Yesh Gvohim Alehem. That even the elite class, you could call it, there are those that are above them. And above those, there are also greater, meaning the Leviim recognize the Kohanim, and the Kohanim recognize God, meaning that there's this hierarchy, and that a person shouldn't think that they're the end-all and be-all. There's something about not allowing leadership to lead to pride and gava that I think is part of the message of Truma Maaser. So even though we're required to honor the Leviim in this way, the Leviim have those that they're required to honor, and then the Kohanim have God who they're required to honor, and there's always this hierarchy. The next chinuch, and this is going to be the last chinuch that we're going to see, and then we're going to try to get into some of the practical halachot of how to do tithes today. And this, you'll see, I quoted from Shin Samech, Mitzvat Ma'aser Behima Tehora. So this is something that we're not going to be talking about Ma'aser Behima, but the chinuch, when talking about the Maaser Sheni, makes reference to here. He said, I explain the reasoning here, because the halacha of Maaser Behima is similar to the halacha of Maaser Sheni. Now, what's Maaser Sheni? In order to understand Maaser Sheni, I want to talk a little bit about the cycle of the Shemitah years. So we all know that the 7th year is Shemitah, But what might not be as well known is that within the 7 years, the years are broken up in terms of which gifts you're supposed to give. So every year, except for Shemitah, which we're going to see on Shemitah, you're not chayav and Truma and Maasrot because it doesn't belong to you. Okay, and one of the, as I was going to mention earlier, that one of the situations in which you're not required to give Truma and Maasrot is if it's hefker. If something has no owner, then anybody can eat it and nobody's obligated to Truma and Maasrot. So if you're like going on a hike and there's a fig tree in the middle of whatever, or in the middle of the yishuv and it's not gated and it doesn't belong to anybody and anybody has access to it and has permission to use it, then you can eat freely from the produce without worrying about Truma and Maasrot. And that's the status of the produce during Shemitah. So if it's hefker, then there's no requirements of Truma and Maasrot. But of the 6 years leading up to Shemitah, there's a cycle. So Truma, Gedola, Maaser, Rishon, Truma, Maaser every year of the 6. But on the 1st and 2nd and 4th and 5th years, there's a second Maaser that has to be taken. And this is called Maaser Sheni. Maaser Sheni belongs to you, but you're supposed to bring to Yerushalayim and eat it there. That's the law of Maaser Sheni. Okay, so when there was a Beit HaMikdash and when there was Aliyah L'Regel, you would bring your Maaser Sheni to Yerushalayim in years 1, 2, 4, and 5. What about years 3 and 6? So years 3 and 6, the Maaser, instead of Maaser Sheni, there's Maaser Ani. The second 10th that you take, which is really 9% of your produce, because it's 10% of the 90% that's left after you do Maaser Rishon, so 9% of your produce, you give to an Ani, to a poor person. So what did the Ani do during the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th years? So it would be a good idea to hang around in Yerushalayim because you needed to eat it. The law of Maaser Sheni is you can't do anything with it except for eat it. So if you're wealthy and you have a lot, like your 10th is a lot or your 9th is a lot, you would bring it to Yerushalayim to be eaten in Yerushalayim by whoever's there. So you would share it because otherwise it's going to go to waste. Okay, so that's the halacha of Maaser Sheni. What if you have too much of whatever to be eaten? So there's something called Pidyon Maaser Sheni. You could redeem the Maaser Sheni on a coin, on money. That the kedusha, Maaser Sheni has kedusha. That kedusha would be transferred to the money, and then your produce would be whole. It would be fine. You could eat it, and then you take that money to Yerushalayim and you purchase food. It could be meat. It could be all types of food. You purchase food, and that food gets eaten b'kedusha in Yerushalayim. So that's the deal with Maaser Sheni. And that's also true with Maaser Behema. So here, the why do we have this halacha that you have to bring the produce? For 4 years out of 7, you have to bring your produce to Yerushalayim. Mishorshei ha-mitzvah, shaha'el baruch hu bachar be'am Yisrael, v'chafetz l'man tikol liyot kulam oskei Torah v'yodei shemo. God chose the Jewish people, and He wants everyone to be osek b'Torah. And to know, everybody should learn Torah. Everybody should have a connection with Him. Everybody should be close with God and spend time learning His Torah. So He, in His wisdom, God placed this mitzvah so that people would connect with Him. Ki yodea Elokim sherov bnei adam nimshachim achar hachomer. God knows that most people are not drawn to the intellectual, spiritual pursuits, but they're drawn to physical pursuits, and they have physical needs. And they're not going to all constantly be engaged in spiritual pursuits. So He made a place where everybody would know Torah. He understood that everybody is going to establish their livelihood. They're going to live where their parnasa is, right? So they're going to live where they have a job. ולכן בהעלות כל איש מעשר כל בקר וצאן 3 שנה בשנה במקום שעשה החוכמה והתורה שם בירושלים, and by on an annual basis bringing up their tithes, the Maaser Sheni or the Maaser Behema to Yerushalayim, which is the place of Torah, Ki Mitzion Tzitze Torah, and this is certainly true to this day. You know how many yeshivas and how much Torah learning is going on in Yerushalayim, and that's where the Sanhedrin sat, and that's where the source of Torah would be in Yerushalayim. Shesham HaSanhedrin Yodei Dan Mevinei Mada U'Kamo Kein Na'aleh L'Sham Maaser Tvuato B'Arba Shnei Shemitah Kamo Sheyadua Shemaaser Sheni Nachal Sham V'Chein Atarabai. There were all these situations where people had to come to Yerushalayim, and that way they would always have an opportunity to go, and while they're in Yerushalayim, they're going to go to ask their questions, and they're going to go to hear shir, and they're going to go to learn, and that way they'll be connected to Torah on a consistent basis. And then he says, Al Kol Panim, so he'll come once every 4 years. Either the landowner would go himself, or he would send one of his children. He would say, let's say he has a vast, amount of produce, of wealth. It has to all be in Yerushalayim. So he takes one kid. He says, here's your income. Your income is Maaser Sheni. You're going to eat Maaser Sheni all year. You're going to be in Yerushalayim all year. You're not going to be in Yerushalayim. What are you going to do in Yerushalayim? You don't have to work the land because I'm giving you your food. So you're going to learn. So he's going to be a member of the household that will go for the year or two, Shana Ba'aretz, and will go and will learn there. And then what's going to happen when they come home? Okay? Umitoch kach yevachol bayit v'bayit mikol Yisrael ish chacham yodei Torah. You're going to have a totally knowledgeable person in every household. Asher yilmad b'chochmato kol beit aviv, and he'll come home and he'll educate the rest of the family in a nice way, respectful way, hopefully, right? But he'll come and he'll be the source of knowledge. Uvechein timalei haaretz de'at Hashem, and the entire land will be filled with knowledge of God. Because what happens if you have a community with just one scholar or even 10 scholars? You are not everybody has access to those people. Certainly the women and children don't have access to those people, and they're not going to have the opportunity to learn. And even if they hear it once a week, they're not going to really integrate it. They can go to shir, hear it, leave it there, come home and do what they want, and not without really knowledge. But if you have the learned person in every household, somebody who really knows, everybody will know. They'll have, it's like you have your rabbi in your home, right? What's happening? You're sending someone.
The goal of Maasrot is to have in every home. So like the goal is to have one worker, one learner.
I don't know one, but like to have a split division within the household, that you have those that are more involved in the Torah, Kemach and Torah, right? You could have Kemach and Torah, that you're, right? That you have a division of labor within the household of those that are working the lands, and those that are the spiritual, intellectual pursuits, perhaps, okay? There are those that provide the Gashmiot, and there are those that provide the Ruchniot, and then they can work together, and having that, but they work together, they need each other, and they're dependent on each other, and they're respectful of one another, hopefully, and it creates this kind of democratic way of sharing Torah, that it's not, it's not just the elite, the Levium, who are the ones that are serving God, but every household has someone who has that deeper connection and that deeper, knowledge. Yeah, but within households, like it's within, the Shvatim each have their own goals and their own responsibilities, but even within the household, there can be a division of who's more involved in the spiritual pursuits and who's less involved. We have 45 minutes. Is that how long is it? Okay, so we have another 10 minutes, which is daunting, but I want to go through, I'm going to stop sharing this document, and I want to talk a little bit about what we do today and how we can teach Truma Maasrot in our garden today. So I said there's situations where it's not required. So for example, Hefker, if it doesn't belong to anybody. And by the way, everybody can make, let's say you have, let me just try to find where to share this. You can be mafkir something in your garden. Like let's say we had a basil plant once. It's not always so convenient. You're taking a few pieces, So what you can do is you can be mafkir a plant. You have to mean it sincerely. And you can't be mafkir only for certain people. You have to say, I am announcing that anybody who wants to take from these tomatoes is welcome to take it, but it has to be accessible. Or you could put a sign on your door. You want, access, knock on my door and I'll escort you to my garden and I will let you take from my garden. So it has to be something that there is access to, and you have to announce it in front of 3 people, 2 of whom are kosher Eidim. So it has to be 2 men who are kosher Eidim, who are not relatives and who are religious. And the third could be a woman, but it has to be in front of 3 because you need to have one person who's the person who's hearing it and 2 people who can testify that it actually happens, right? It has to be something that's serious and real. So if you in front of 3 people, 2 of whom are kosher Eidim, say, here, anybody who wants to take of my tomato plant is welcome to. So from then on it's hefker, and anybody can take, and you can take without Truma or Maasrot. But if you have a garden, yeah.
We could do that on WhatsApp or something like that, or it has to be in front of the people?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. I think I would tend to say it would be better to do it in front of people who can see it and who can, who have access to it, but I'm not sure. That's a good question. Okay. Okay. If somebody sends me WhatsApp, then I'm more likely to remember to do that. Okay. Now, if you're not planning to be mafkir your produce, so then you're obligated min haTorah according to some poskim nowadays it's d'Rabbanan, but you're definitely obligated to take Truma and Maasrot for sure. There's a third situation where some have the minhag to take Truma and Maasrot, and that's when, I'm not going to get into this too much, but basically the difference between, if you buy something from a store that doesn't have hashgacha, then you need to take Truma and Maasrot, okay? And you can, right? It's not like it's usher to buy there, but if you buy produce, like you go to the shop and there's no teudah, you can buy it, but you have to take Truma and Maasrot, but without a bracha. Because there's a lot of different steps in the processing in Israel where, especially with major companies, where somebody's probably taking Truma and Maasrot along the way. So the halacha is when you're not sure if you need to, then you do it without a bracha. Now, if you buy produce from a mahadran hashgacha, then you can be almost 99% sure that Truma and Maasrot were taken properly. But if you buy produce from a non-mahadran hashgacha, then it's not 99% that they have, because it's very hard to do properly. And this is something that we heard a lecture from somebody who's high up in the kashrut industry, and that the way produce works in Israel is that people are dropping off and then they go from the warehouse to the retailer, and there's a mashgiach that comes once every hour, but is he catching every truck that comes in? There's a certain degree of, so you can be 80% sure, maybe higher than 80% sure, but if you want to be very strict about this halachot, and this is something that we do in our home, if we buy from a non-mahadran hashgacha, then we take Truma and Maasrot without all the chumras of it, and we don't say a bracha, but and we're going to see that it's hard to learn it, but it's not that difficult to do once you know what you're doing, to just set aside. So what I want to focus on is your garden. In your garden, and for sure, whether you want to accept the extra stringency from a non-mahadran store, that's a different issue. But right now, let's talk about your garden. So what do you need to do? And I don't know, I thought I shared the screen. Let me try that again. I hope this is it. Okay, so I found this nice little, there's a few things that we can look at. Here, this is something that I just found online from the CRC with instructions on how to do everything I'm going to tell you. You can find on different websites. You could just look for instructions for separating Truma and Maasrot, and you'll find it listed. If you look in your sitter, which I I took a picture, but my WhatsApp is just not working here. Let's see if I can pull that up, and I'll show you that if you open up your siddur, any standard siddur has a page where it has the nusach that you're supposed to say for being mafresh, truma, and maasrot. But I want to explain a little bit about how it works. Okay. The parts of the truma and maasrot that need to be shared are, maaser can be eaten. It doesn't need to be eaten only by kohanim b'kedusha. So even though you're going to separate the 1/10 of your produce for the Levi, you can eat that, right? A Levi can share it with you, and nowadays we say that we don't know for sure who the Levium are, and if the burden of proof is on them, and until they can prove that they're Levium, then I don't have to give it to them. So you don't have to give your 10th to a Levi. It's an extra chumrah if you want to. We happen to have a lot of neighbors who are Levium, so we try to find someone who's willing to take our lemons, our master lemons, but it's not necessary to give it to a Levi. Also, master ani. Let's say this year, for vegetables is the 6th year. For fruit after Tisha B'Av, after Tu B'Av, Tu B'Shvat. After Tu B'Shvat will be the 6th year. So this year, let's say for these tomatoes, so it's going to be Maser Ani. So what do you do about Maser Ani? So technically you should give it to an Ani, but they won't necessarily want your 4, tomatoes that you're giving them. And so what you could do is you can lend money to an Ani and say, you'll pay me back from the fruit of the Maser Ani. Okay, and then I'm sorry, how does it work? You're lending them, and they pay you back from them. So you have to then kind of give it to the ani, and he gives it back to you. Give it to the ani as master ani, and then he gives it back to you to pay off the loan. Okay, and you could do that. You don't have to actually give it to an ani. You can give it to someone else and say, "Can you accept this on behalf of the ani?" And then they give it back to you. Okay, and that's good to do. So you give money to a gadai tzedakah or to an ani and say, I'm giving you this money for the future master ani that I'm going to give. I'm lending it to you, and you're going to pay it back to me through the master ani that I'm going to buy back from you. Then you can eat it. Then you can eat the master ani. So the only part that actually that can't be eaten is the truma, which is just a small amount, and the Truma Maser. So the 10th of a 10th that the Levi has to give from what you give him, that he has to give a 10th of that to the Kohanim, that can't be eaten.
That's the Levi's problem.
No, because you have in your possession the Maser.
But if you give it to the Levi.
But you're usually not giving it to the Levi. Yeah, but we take care of it. Okay, so the nusach, you simultaneously take the Truma Maser, right? So there's the two issues. There's separating it and there's giving it, and they're not connected. So what you're obligated to do is to separate it. Now, from what you've separated, most of it is kosher to eat, except for the truma and the truma maser. Okay, how much is that? So the truma maser, the truma maser is 1/100th, because it's a 10th of a 10th. Okay, so 1/100th of your produce. Here we have 40, so this is going to be a quarter of a tomato. Right, a quarter of a tomato, that's going to be the Truma Maser. And a little bit more than that is the Truma Gedola, okay? Because Truma Gedola has to be any amount, right? Just a little bit. So what you have to actually separate, do you have a knife? Here, plate and a knife. Sure. So I am taking, I'm actually going to take one of these more green tomatoes, because anyway, what happens to the truma to the truma is you have to discard of it honorably. So you wrap it. The minute I just double wrap it and throw it out, or some people let it rot like you would with Shemitah. Okay, so I have to take a little bit more than a quarter of this. You can, but it's a waste, So you take a little bit more than a quarter. You're nervous, it's more like a third, So I took a little bit more than a quarter of the tomato, and I'm gonna what? Is it? Yeah. What's the right arithmetic?
Supposed to take 1/100.
Yeah.
Plus 40.
Right.
One plus 40.
Yeah.
What?
10% would be
1 tomato. Well, so 10% would be 4 tomatoes.
yeah. And
It's
what's 10% of 4 tomatoes?
What's 10% of 4 tomatoes?
I just look at me when it comes to numbers.
Can you tell me?
Yeah, I'm Googling.
0.04. It's not a quarter. A quarter is 0.25. 0.25 is a quarter. Right?
Okay. So I'm taking extra. Okay, so I'm taking too much.
It's 0.4.
0.4. So
10% of 4 is 0.4. It's more.
okay. Is okay. Okay. So I'm taking.
Leora, 1 second, just a technical question.
Yeah.
Are you still sharing something from the screen as sources? Because
Yes.
if not, maybe hit stop share, then we'll see you better. Right now, we just see a blue screen with a red thing.
Yeah, I don't know why.
We don't see any sources.
Yeah. Okay. One 100th of 100 would be 1 tomato.
Correct.
Okay, but 1/100th of 40 is less than 1 tomato. So, okay, we'll take one. I'm going to take the whole thing. I'm going to take the whole tomato. I'm taking extra. Okay. Now,
A little less than half.
a little
0.40. A little less
That's what I said.
0.40. So not a quarter. So it's a little 0.40. Okay, fine. I'm sorry. My math is off. So more than a quarter. So I'm going to take the bigger side. So now I'm going to take the whole tomato for now. So now I want to show you this, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to share and let you see me. I don't know why that's not working. That should work, but let's try this. So I'm going to take this portion, I'm taking this 1 tomato off. It's a lot more than I need, but I'm taking this 1 tomato off. It should be a 0.40 of the tomato. Okay, so a little bit less than half the tomato plus, so around half the tomato. And I'm going to say, a little bit more than 1%. You see this little, can you see that little movement that happened there? Where this this little bit more than 1%. What it's showing here is, imagine I have 100 tomatoes, so I take a little bit more than 1. And I say the following, which I don't have in front of me, one moment. And I say the following. Now, I'm not doing that because do you have a sitter, actually? Sorry that I'm having some technical difficulties. I thought you said 0.04. Okay. So here, I'm going to actually, I found what I'm looking for, and hopefully I'll be able to share this with you. So new share. Okay, can you guys see the sitter the page from the sitter in front of you? Can somebody answer me? Is that what you're seeing? Elisa?
We're seeing.
Yes, I see.
Okay, so now I'm going to say the bracha, and I'm taking this more than half of a tomato. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu v'tzaveh tzivanu lafrish Terumot u'Maasrot. So this is now the Truma and the Terumot Maaser. But now I say the following formula. What I need to do is I don't need to physically separate the Maaser, but I need to designate where the Maaser is. So you can do the hafrasha verbally. I don't have to actually remove it. This I have to actually take apart because this is I'm going to put aside and I'm going to discard with honor. But the rest of it, I need to say this formula that is going to designate what is what, okay? So I say, Mashu yoter me'echad min kol sheyesh kan, harehu truma gdola b'tzvono. So that which is a little bit more than 1/100th of what I have here, so that is going to be truma gdola in its northern side, meaning it doesn't really matter if I know which is north, which is south. I just have to designate something, some part of the truma. And that's good. That's on that slide. But the 100, which I have here, is it more important for you guys to see me than see the text? So let me see if I can arrange it so that I can see the text and not see. Okay, I'm not sure if I can do that. So I'm going to go back to this. So the part which is the 1/100th plus 9 like it in this bag, so that on the upper part of the fruit, because of the produce, which I have to separate aside. Harehe Maaseh Rishon, that's the Maaseh Rishon. Okay, so now I've designated the Maaseh Rishon. Oto hachad minei shasitiv Maaseh Rishon, harehu Truma Maaseh. And the part, that 1/100th of that part, that's a little bit more, that's Truma Maaseh. O tisha chalakim ka'ele b'tzad ha'tachton shel ha'perot harehe Maaseh Sheni. And now I'm going to designate Maaseh Sheni. V'im him chayavim b'Maaseh Ani, harehe Maaseh Ani. But if they're obligated Maaseh Ani, then they're Maaseh Ani. So the way the people who wrote this nusach created it, it was in such a way that you didn't need to know if we're dealing with a year of Maaseh Sheni or Maaseh Ani, because sometimes the way to count what produce are we talking about, it could be a little bit complicated. So you see the nusach in such a way that it doesn't really matter if it's Maaseh Sheni or Maaseh Ani. Now, the complicated part that I haven't really, that's not so relevant for the produce right now, and therefore we don't have to get into it for this to be kosher, okay, is the question of if it's Maaseh Sheni, then what do we do with the Maaseh Sheni? Because you're not allowed, that has to be eaten in Yerushalayim, but we're not going to do Kedusha, and that can't be done today. So what we have to do is we have to do the Pidyon Maaseh Sheni. We redeem it on a coin. And you have to have a coin that's designated for the redemption of Maaseh Sheni, which is a coin that then gets destroyed during the 4th and the 7th year before Pasach. And there's rules about how to make that coin and how to use that coin and what the coin can be good for, and that I don't have time to get into. But that's the next step. Right now, these are for sure Maaseh Ani, so we don't have to worry about that. The Maaseh Ani we can deal with we'll find an ani to give it to us, to lend money to exchange for money. But those are basically the rules of how to be mafresh. I'm sorry that I got a little bit messed up with the math. Should have prepared better. But the guidelines are what you need to know to separate. You need to physically separate a little bit more than 1/100th of your produce, which you can usually, if you're not, you can figure out the math of that. If you have, 10 cucumbers and it's 1/10 of 1 cucumber, and that you set aside, that you wrap up and you throw out after you say this nusach. If it's for sure, tevel. If it's something that you're not sure, then you wouldn't say the bracha. You would just say this nusach. You're designating different sides for the Maaseh Sheni, Maaseh Ani, and for the Maaseh Rishon. But now this is kosher. This can be eaten, and I hope that I've given a quick summary. There's a lot more complicated details, and if you want to get in touch with me, you can get my number from Elisa, and I can help work that out. But I hope that this will be a zchut for those of you who have produce, who can grow things in this land. It is so special to be able to take the bracha that Hashem gives you, to give back, to use it to enhance our connection to Hashem, enhance our Torah knowledge, enhance our observance of halacha, and that every act of eating should be one of connection and not just one of satisfying our guts. Any questions? Yeah. I'm listening. People, are you speaking? Lara, yes. I can't.
Okay, you hear me? Oh, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this may be a stupid question. You might have covered it. Oh, sorry.
I can't. Sipar, I can't hear you. Hello? Can you speak louder? I can't hear you. Yes?
I just want to
Zipporah, I can't hear you at all.
Okay, Tzipora just wrote me. She was saying, is the bracha said before or after separation?
That's a great question. I think it is said after. I think it's when you're designating it, meaning you hold it in your hands and you say it. But I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you about that also. Let me see if it says it in the sitter. Let me just see. In the screen that I shared, one moment, if it says that. Yeah, I'm not sure. By the way, I also noted here, it's if you're taking several types at once and you add the words kol min al mino, in every place that you're, everything that you're mafresh, you say every type on its type. Lara, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, thank you. You might have said it before, but I might have missed it. Like when we're shopping in Super Deal, Supercell, wherever, are Trumot and Maasrot taken?
Okay, so most of the time, look, if a place has a tuda, that means that they've taken care of Truma Maasrot. Okay?
How do we know if they have a tuda?
To always not rely on other people to do that, but to do it themselves.
Wait, say that again. I'm sorry.
That every place that has a tuda, part of what that tuda means is that they've taken care of Truma Maasrot.
Even if it's not.
So every tuda means that part of that is that they've taken care of Truma Maasrot. Now,
how do we know if they have a tuda?
You have to ask. In the produce department, every produce department should have a tuda. Now there is just like if you go to a restaurant and there's a tuda, then it means they've taken care of all the rules of kashrus. There's those that are more strict about the rules, and there are those that are less strict about the rules. So if it's a tuda that's not mahadrin, so that means that they've taken care of Truma Maasrot, but not necessarily with all the strictures that are involved. So there are those that are stricter, like if you would only eat in a mahadrin restaurant and you would only buy mahadrin produce. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. I just don't know how to get in. I guess you would walk into the store and ask the store.
Yeah, any store Super Deal has a tuda. Like they have a tuda. I don't think it has a mahadrin tuda, but it has a tuda.
And what about Supercell?
Rami Levy's produce department has a mahadrin tuda. So
and
there
Supercell online, do you know that? Supercell online?
I have no idea. I have no idea. But it's really, it's every restaurant you have the right to ask. You ask a customer service, can I see your tuda? Sometimes they have it hanging in the produce department. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we'll have a Chodesh Tov.
Leora was trying to ask something else. 1 minute, she just wrote me in the chat. She was trying to ask about let me just read what she wrote. Institutes that keep a coin so that you don't have to keep track of them.
Yes. So there are places, if you don't have your own coin, there are institutes like Machon Haaretz or something like that, where they keep a coin and you can refer to their coin for Pidyon Maaser Sheni. Yes. Okay, well, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Leora.
much. Thank you.
Leora. Elisa.